Hi. Hi guys. I haven't heard from you guys in ages. What's happening? I thought this was a reciprocal relationship. Sorry the quality of this is not up to standard. I'm moving out in like 30 minutes, so I'm gonna try and do this really fast. I know I've been gone for a while, but I'm back to talk about dead people. I am currently residing in Ireland, which has some very incredible, unique, and beautiful archaeological history. But I think the thing I love the most about this place is its insane amount of bog bodies. That's actually why I'm here. I just wanted to get a better look at them. And I've been here for 6 months. They won't let me leave. Oh, fig tree. Oh, fig tree. What's a bog body? What are you talking about? I have no idea what's going on. Why do you think I'm here? You think I'm just going to sit and stare at you the whole time? No. Today, we're going to talk about bog bodies are a naturally occurring phenomenon where people who have passed away in peat bogs are perfectly preserved by the chemicals that are around in the bogs. Individuals from the Iron Age, around like 500 to 100 BC, have been so incredibly preserved by these bogs that we can look at them as if they're like died like 2 weeks ago. These people have been dead for thousands of years, but we can see the expressions etched into their brows. What I find to be one of the most exceptionally captivating parts of bog bodies is that it's believed that their mummification was quite accidental. It's highly, highly unlikely that the Iron Age communities who ritually sacrificed their royalty to the bogs did so because they knew that they would be preserved. It's more likely they did it just because they knew that the bogs had some kind of ritualistic purpose. Oh, yeah, did I neglect to mention that? Bog bodies are human sacrifices. I know. It's all anyone wants to hear about. It's all anyone wants to hear about. Let's just talk about it. Over 1,000 bodies have been found preserved in peat bogs across Northern Europe. That's including Denmark, in the UK, in Ireland, and in Germany, and also the Netherlands. These people sacrifice to the bogs as ritual offerings. And the bog's unique chemical concoction, as well as its waterlogged condition, makes it the perfect place to preserve a body for thousands of years. Quickly, let's go over a few reasons why a bog can preserve a body really good. Firstly, the acidity is up there. Bogs have extremely high acidity in their water, which comes from the decaying plant materials in them. And this acidity acts as a bit of a natural preservation tactic because it inhibits the growth of bacteria and fungi, therefore slowing the decomposition of organic matter, like a human body. Also, the anaerobic conditions of the bog help. The anaerobic, i.e. the lack of oxygen, the sans aerobic. Usually oxygen plays a big part in decaying things. But in the bogs, there's a limited amount of oxygen to be had. Because it's so waterlogged, oxygen can't really get in there, can't do its business really well. Peat bogs also have a lot of tannins in their water. Not the kind of tannins that make wine. Actually, maybe it is the kind of tannins that make wine. These tannins bind to proteins in the tissues of the decaying people, and they provide a kind of resistance to bacteria or enzymes trying to grow and decay. Bogs are also really cold, which helps. It's the whole Disney's head in the freezer thing. Cold environments are just really good at stopping the decaying process. Also, over time, the bogs tend to mineralize the body, which almost makes it like a fossilized version of itself and retains some incredible detail. Dying in a bog is why people who died 2,000 years ago can look like this today. And they didn't even have sunscreen back then. So no, you do not need SPF, you just need bog. Here in the National Museum of Ireland, there are 5 bog bodies on display. I love them all. I've seen them all many times. I go there quite often. I think they know me by name. And we know that all of these guys were ritually sacrificed for a few reasons, all of which, funnily enough, are backed up by archaeological evidence. I love it when that happens. Usually the bodies are quite mutilated before being placed into the bog. So, it's unlikely that they kind of just tripped and fell into the bog if they're also got stab wounds everywhere. Clearly there was something else at play here. Around Ireland and a lot of parts of Northern Europe, water also plays a really big role in the belief systems and in rituals. Bogs specifically tend to have an association with the boundaries between worlds, spiritual world and the physical world. And the timing of the depositions of these bodies into the bogs also kind of coincides with seasonal or agricultural rituals. So a lot to be said about how community building a ritual sacrifice can be. Not that I've ever partaken in one personally, but if you're feeling like you need to get closer to your neighbors, having a strong sense of shared rituals and beliefs can really form lifelong bonds, to be honest. It's a way of expressing collective values, and I am not going to yuck someone else's yum. My favorite bog body, or Bogdy, if you don't have much time, I guess, from Ireland is Old Krogan Man. Now, I know he doesn't have a head, but that is not important. That is not a deal breaker for me. You're probably thinking all these other bog bodies have heads and faces and you can see their eyes and their expressions. And yes, that is wonderful and amazing and I love them all as well. But this guy's story, I just love so much. Old Krogan Man was accidentally found in a peat bog in County Offaly in June 2003. And I like to think that kind of connects us through the millennia somehow. I like to think I was also found accidentally in a peat bog in June of 2003. Krogan is believed to have died somewhere between the years of 362 BC and 175 BC, and he was probably in his early 20s. He's so me, we're both Geminis in our 20s just trying to get by. Based on his arm span, which is kind of all we have of him, archaeologists estimated him to have stood at about 182 to 198 meters tall, which is insanely impressive for Iron Age Ireland. Low-key impressive for 2024 AD Ireland too. Because he was so well preserved, and because this is like the only part of him that they had, they were also able to analyze the contents of his stomach and figure out his last meal, which was wheat and buttermilk. What I love more than anything about old Krogan man are his hands. Listen, okay? His hands have been insanely well, this man died 2,000 years ago, and his hands, you can see the position they're in, you can see his veins, you can see the skin, you can see everything. Apart from confronting me about my own mortality, they actually tell us a really interesting story about who he was in life. His nails looking so manicured and neat and looking like he's never done a hard day's work in his life, as well as this armband, which was still found around his left arm, made archaeologists think that he was someone of quite high social status. But what would make a community want to sacrifice someone of such high status? I mean, I can tell you why I would, but I don't think it's the same reason. It's been suggested that Krogan was actually a king, and that his people may have sacrificed him in response to poor harvests because of bad weather conditions. And they would have hoped that his death would appease some kind of deity and restore some kind of agricultural prosperity. During the Iron Age, like I said, bogs were kind of seen as these boundary spaces between a more spiritual and the physical realms, because they were like these gaps between civilization and the dense forest that covered most of the country. And it was in these gaps that the king's authority ended. He didn't have any control over the natural world. Instead, this was ruled over by a goddess of the wilderness. And in becoming a king in Ireland, you kind of symbolically married this goddess. This would give him some kind of power over the natural world that his people relied on to survive. Therefore, if a natural disaster occurred, or it was a bad harvest, or anything like that, it was kind of the king's fault. He was supposed to take care of the order of the business between these two worlds, between the two realms. So potentially in sacrificing him, they would appease the goddess of the wilderness and maybe get things going again, you know? However, that's not really the theory that I like the most. There is another theory which I think is way more dramatic, way more poetic, and the museum backs me up on this one. I think this guy was a prince, and his sacrifice was actually a scapegoat. Now, we may not have a lot of Krogan's body left, but we do have like the most important parts: his hands and his chest. His chest is important because we can see that his nipples were cut off. Nipples and kingship in Iron Age Ireland actually have quite an intertwined relationship. It was seen as an act of submission to like suck the king's nipples. That was essentially a way for you to denote your loyalty to the king. And so this man, having had his nipples cut off, it essentially bars him from ever becoming king, because he's lost that integral part of superiority. And this act of sucking a king's nipples, he can't have that done because he doesn't have nipples. You get what I'm saying? This is a serious topic, okay? Stop laughing. He was potentially a prince or in line to the throne, but someone wanted the throne for themselves. So they cut his nipples off so that he could never assume the title of king. I think that's really cool. I just am a really big fan of underdog prince who is destined to never be king and then gets sacrificed to the bog. I feel like that's just so me. Like, I want to do that. So that's my buddy Krogan. Possibly the most famous bog body in all of the world is the Tulland man, who was found in Denmark. And what's so exceptionally, incredibly beautiful about this man is the look on his face and how well preserved it is. You can see this sense of relief and peaceful oblivion. He is thought to have died around 400 BC. So this is a man from 2,400 years ago. Without him having been preserved in this way, we never would have known his story. He was found in 1950 by Viggo and Emil Hoggaard in a peat bog. And at first, because he was so well preserved, these guys thought they had found like a recent murder victim. They called up the police and they were like, this guy, someone's been murdered and buried in a bog. When the police got there, they were like, no, that's not true. And then the archaeologists got there and they're like, yes, that is true, but from 2,000 years ago. So his body was arranged in the fetal position and he was wearing a cap of sheepskin and a noose was drawn around his neck. He's also believed to have been a ritual sacrifice to assure some kind of fertility of the land. But like the bog bodies that we see in Ireland, there is no way that people sacrificing this man would have known how well preserved he would have been 2,500 years later. Can you imagine living 2,000 years ago? To even conceptualize that 2,000 years later, the person you sacrificed, their body is still perfectly preserved and is being studied by people from the future. Now, unfortunately, I really have to go because I'm technically not supposed to be here anymore. But I'd like to introduce you to the other bog bodies that are on display in the National Museum of Ireland. If you're ever in Dublin and you want to go say hi, please do. It's a really incredible exhibition. So, the guys we got on the roster. There's the Cashel Man, who is actually one of the oldest bog bodies that we have ever. He's the oldest fleshed body ever found in Europe. He's from 2000 BC, so that's 4,000 years ago. Another one of my favorites is the Clonachaven Man. I really enjoy this one because he's got like a full head of hair. He's insanely well preserved. You can see his face so well. Like you can look into his eyes. And I have. And they were beautiful. What's really cool about him is that they analyzed his stomach for what he last ate, and they found that he had lots of veggies, lots of protein. What this indicates is that he may have been killed during the summer months. The most insightful piece of information we can gather about him is his hairstyle, which shows us potentially how people may have styled their hair at this period. I actually used a kind of hair gel to style his hair, and this was made out of plant oil and pine resin, which would have had to have been imported from France or northern Spain. And it was tied up with a hair tie. More interestingly though, this points to trade between Ireland and southern Europe. Probably a wealthy fellow, I would say. He's getting all that pine resin just for his hair. It's been suggested by archaeologists that the updo sort of hairstyle may have been a way for men to make themselves look taller. This guy stood at about 157 centimeters, which is like 5'2". There is so much we can find out about Iron Age Ireland from this guy. He's also a redhead, which may not be attributed to the fact that he's from Ireland. It might just be attributed to the chemicals in the peat bog. He was also murdered really brutally. His skull was split open by some kind of sharp object. And sorry, this is kind of gross, but there's parts of his brain matter found in the wound on the top of his head. He was also disemboweled. So they really didn't like him. This is another potential kingly sacrifice. So that's my crew. It truly is getting really dark. I'd love to keep talking to you guys forever, but the sun is telling me it's time to go. If you have a favorite bog body that I didn't mention, please tell us about them. I would really love to know. There are so many in Denmark. Actually, I was in Copenhagen a month or so ago, and unfortunately the Tullen Man is nowhere near Copenhagen, so I didn't get to go see him. But I did see this lovely lady in the museum in Copenhagen, and I wasn't expecting her to be there, so I was very excited. This is the woman from Huldremors, I think. She's from the 2nd century BC. And what makes her different to the bog bodies found in Ireland, and quite a distinct difference between the Danish and Irish bog bodies, is that Danish bog bodies usually are fully clothed, whereas the Irish ones are always naked. And honestly, the look on her face is quite terrifying. Really quite confronting, but I think it's really quite beautiful. Anyway, I'm getting so cold. This room is freezing, so I'm gonna go. It's good to be back. I love you. Bye, bitch.